Hey, everybody. Before we get to today's episode of the Family Movie Night podcast, where we talk about Christmas Carol movies, I realized once again we forgot to talk about our See Kids parent group on Facebook. The whole reason this podcast even exists is because we at Community Christian want to help encourage and support parents as they raise their children to love Jesus and his way of life above anything else. And we do that all the time at our See Kids parent group on Facebook. So if you're a parent, you need to go to our church's Facebook page at Community Christian Church, find the groups tab, click on that, find the See Kids parent group, and then make sure you click the join group button where you can join our group and be encouraged and supported as you raise your children to love Jesus and his way of life, which is what we're all about here on this podcast. So let's get to this week's episode. Everybody, welcome back to the Family Movie Night podcast. This is episode 3, the one with all the Scrooges, and we are your 3 ghosts leading you through this wonderful experience. I, of course, am Nathan. I'm on staff here at the church, and I'm not going to tell you which ghost I am, of course, but the jolliest ghost of them all, the least Scrooge I've ever met in my entire life is, of course, my good friend, Mr. Donnie Dorsey, the ghost of Christmas present. Donnie, how are you doing?
Bah humbug. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You couldn't even pull that off if you wanted to. You couldn't even, if you wanted to be a Scrooge, you couldn't be a Scrooge.
It wasn't realistic. Like, no one's going to buy that. They'd be like, really though?
That's the worst performance I've ever seen from a Scrooge since Patrick Stewart. Okay, so... I'm just messing. Sir
I do not appreciate that slander for Patrick Stewart.
Sir Patrick Stewart, I apologize. Okay. So of course you just heard his voice there. The joyful, as always, Ghost of Christmas Past, particularly the Carol Kane version from 1988 Scrooge. Mr. Sawyer Hewlett, how you doing, Sawyer?
I'm doing good. I had a lot of fun doing this episode, so I had a lot of fun watching these movies. So.
Yeah, I think we have more fun watching this movie than these movies than maybe anyone does hearing us talk about them.
Yeah.
But we do have a good time doing that. And of course, I am your ghost of Christmas future, the one who destroys all of your dreams and everything you've ever loved in life. And we are very glad to have you guys joining us here. In case this is your first time watching, we want you to know what we do. This is a movie podcast by Community Christian Church's family ministry, because at our family ministry, we want to help you raise your children to love Jesus and his way of life more than anything else. And we want to help you have better conversations around the kind of content that you consume as a family, because the stories that we consume, whether it be something we're watching on a movie or on TV or in the news media, whatever you're consuming, it forms you. And so we want to help you when you're raising your children to help them interpret the content they consume in a way that helps them love Jesus and his way of life more. And in this particular episode, we are talking about Christmas Carol, A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens' wonderful novel that has just been surviving throughout past couple centuries here. People constantly remaking this thing over and over again in all different ways. And there's a lot of great themes around this movie, but we know because there's so many versions of this movie out there, we didn't just want to pick one version to talk about. All of us watched a different version of this movie, and we think that are more appropriate for different age levels. So if you've got young kids to teenagers, there's all different versions of this to watch. But let's start with what Donnie watched. Let's start with what Donnie watched. Donnie, you watched the 2009 Robert Zemeckis version of the Christmas Carol starring Jim Carrey. And I think that's available on Disney Plus. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
So, Donnie, what was your takeaway? Is this the first time you've seen this particular version?
When after like kind of like going through, I was like, I feel like maybe I've watched it, but the time frame between it has been pretty lengthy.
Okay.
But overall, like, I mean, you know, if you're familiar with with Jim Carrey, who's very well known for his like his antics and his facial expressions and just being able to emote things just without saying words. Having him as the main character is a very good use of his skill, because when you watch this, as most people have seen it, it's this crabby old man, that's like, everybody's terrible. And, people are basically like, people are roadblocks to his happiness and successes.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like that's definitely a good point to like pivot on a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of times, like talking to our kids, like sometimes we feel like, they think everything is an obstacle, like other people are obstacles, when oftentimes they are kind of conduits for things.
Right.
It can actually be the way of how we grow and how we, nurture the good things in us, and not get stuck on the moments of like, oh, well, this person doesn't do things the way I think they should.
Yeah.
Or so maybe the way they're doing it, maybe it's a way I can, take into account. And as I take that into account, I will become a little bit more understanding, and maybe it'll grow me in areas that I didn't think would actually had potential to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's huge. So that's a good recommendation there for the 2009 Christmas Carol. It's animated, but it was that motion capture technology. So there were actors on a stage, but they had dots on their face, and they were being captured. Then they animated it afterwards. Sawyer, you watched a movie that from the time I was about 7 on was the movie my family watched every Christmas Eve. But this movie is a hard PG-13. So this is definitely a movie for teenagers, but I think your teenagers, anyone, I mean, once again, I watched it from the time I was 7. So look up on IMDb the content, you can decide. But I think any middle school, high schooler could watch this movie. But it's 1988's Scrooged, starring Bill Murray. Sawyer, how did you enjoy this film?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun watching Scrooge because, number one, I'm a diehard Bill Murray fan, and this is Bill Murray at his most Bill Murray, and also the things that I think it nails about the Christmas Carol story and the vibe in general is making the character of, I think his name is like Frank Cross, but he's, for all intents and purposes, he is Scrooge is the thing. And the thing that nails it, I think, is making him almost like the audience doesn't even love him is the thing. You're kind of just like, gosh, like I love Bill Murray, but this guy is so unlikable. And so it nails that aspect. One area where it definitely lacks is it doesn't ever get that specific, because and we're going to talk about this a lot more going forward. A Christmas Carol is very much about greed and a lack of compassion for fellow man and stuff like that, and definitely like the character of Scrooge has a big superiority complex and stuff like that. It doesn't get that specific in this movie until the very, very end. It does, but yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. It definitely adds stuff to it as well. There's a little bit of a romance with Karen Allen and stuff like that. But I had a lot of fun with this movie because it's also, and as much as I love every movie that we're going to talk about today, it's the funniest. It's the most, in my opinion,
sure.
It's the most fun to watch of all three of these. But yeah.
Yeah, I would say for anyone who has teenagers, Scrooged is the movie of these to watch. I mean, it is hilarious. And I'll say even though a lot of the cultural references don't age well, like isn't the beginning of it? It's the $6 million man. Like the whole joke is that they've got a Santa Claus special starring the $6 million man, and so that no one understands those references, but it's still, I think the humor in and of itself. Carol Kane as the ghost of Christmas past. No, she's the ghost of Christmas present.
Yeah.
Ghost of Christmas present. She is absolutely hilarious.
Oh, I mean, she's so funny. Yeah.
Brings down the house. Anyway, so I'll say
her and Bill play off of each other so well in the movie that I didn't remember at all.
Well, and you get Bobcat Goldthwait going crazy. I mean, just in typical. I mean, it is the most 80s in the cast. And I'll say the Tiny Tim story in that one is so powerful with the little boy who can't talk since he saw his since his dad died. Just super powerful. And it's such a great modern update. So I'll say this: if I will be watching this movie, I watch this movie still every year with my wife. And absolutely wonderful. I may introduce it to my kids this year, so we'll see. But I don't know. But we once again want to say, I know not everyone else is as adventurous as I am on content. You should check the content. It's definitely PG-13, but I definitely think if you have teenagers, this would be a great one. It's streaming on Paramount Plus if you have Paramount Plus, which a surprising number of people I know do have. I have, and I was shocked the amount of people I know. Donnie, I think you have Paramount Plus, don't you?
Yeah, I actually got it because I remember testing it out, like, or hearing about it, and you had mentioned, like, you start naming all of these things that, like, brought up.
Yeah, it has all the Nickelodeon shows.
And you brought them up. I was like, okay, I have to have this, and especially with the price being so low, like it's like $5.
Yeah, it's really not much at all. And my kids love it because they love Keenan and Kel, which all
really?
Oh my gosh, all millennials and Gen Z just got super excited. That's right down our alley. So that was kind of like,
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I was surprised because I turned it on because I was like, okay, I'm curious.
Yeah.
But they got into it and they were laughing at. I was like, what? I
was very excited. It's like when my dad tried to show me HR Puffin stuff when I was a kid. It was like, you gotta watch this show. So I'm forcing my kids to do the same thing. It's just all cyclical. So here we go. Okay. So I watched a movie that I had actually not seen until last year. I'll say this. My family we might have been Scrooges with Christmas in the sense of we didn't do a lot of like traditional Christmas stuff. I had never, I will tell you this. I don't think I've ever, no, that's not true. I know I've watched the Charlie Brown Christmas special all the way through, but maybe only once. I don't really enjoy it. I don't have a lot of affinity for Charlie Brown. And here's another one. I don't get the Muppets just in general. I don't get them. I did not grow up watching the Muppets, and I had never seen until last year a Muppet Christmas Carol. It was the first time I'd ever seen it, and I watched it for this year. And I'll say this much. I love it. I think thematically it might be the best of all of the Christmas Carol stories that we're talking about. It's pretty darn close to the book. I mean, as close as it can to have Sam the Eagle playing a teacher at one point in the thing and having to say it's the American way, and they have to like come in and go, oh, it's the British way. Like, that's just kind of funny. So there's a couple of that. Michael Caine is Scrooge, and it's absolutely fantastic. So I'll say if you got younger kids, my kids loved it. It's a musical. I'm assuming most people have seen it. You guys have both seen Muppet Christmas Carol?
I have not, actually.
I think I saw it once, and it was a long time ago.
Okay, so maybe I'm not in the minority here. So I'll say this: if you haven't seen it, if you got young kids, I'll say kids under the age of 10, this is a pretty darn good one to watch. It and the Jim Carrey one are both really enjoyable, but I'll say because the Muppet Christmas one has like, I know they're not cartoons, they're puppets, but they have cartoon-like features.
Yeah.
My kids really enjoyed it. And so I'll say it's fun. The music's pretty good. And anyway, I think it's a pretty enjoyable one. All of these are pretty short. They're an hour and a half. Scrooge is right around an hour and a half. Isn't that right?
Yeah. It's probably actually the longest out of all three of these, but
Sure.
It's like an hour and 45 minutes, I think.
Sure. So anyway, so those are just the movies in general. But now let's talk about themes. And here's the reason we wanted to talk about this movie. I think A Christmas Carol is often one of the most misunderstood Christmas stories. And in general, has the most powerful message when we properly understand it, at least from a Christian aspect. of what we're supposed to be remembering. As both Sawyer and Donnie have already talked about, kind of the themes of the story are that Scrooge, he's not just like a impolite old man who just doesn't get the joy of Christmas, which in a lot of Christmas carols, that's kind of what's like, oh, he doesn't like the music and he doesn't like celebrating things and he doesn't want to take work off because he just doesn't get Christmas. And I will say this, the first play I ever really was in was I was the little boy who in A Christmas Carol, a local person here made a musical version of A Christmas Carol. And I was in that, and I was the little boy that when he opens up, he's like, boy, what day is today? And I had to go, boy, it's Christmas Day. Like I was that boy in that production. But that one really hit on this idea of like, bah humbug that was Scrooge's greatest crime, was that he doesn't get the joy of a Christmas tree. Yeah. And that's not what the story's about. It really is what Marley's ghost says at the beginning of the film. And he even says in Scrooge, it's not Marley, but it's his business partner, says to him, mankind was supposed to be our business. That we spent all of our time focused on greed and making money and penny pinching and not caring for the poor, not caring for those, not having compassion. As Donnie said, his greatest crime is he sees human beings as mostly an irritation. They're an obstacle in this path. And what Scrooge has to learn is to have genuine compassion, genuine generosity towards other people, that he has been given this blessing and he was meant to use it. So talking about our individual movies here, how do you think those movies did at communicating that message as far as when parents are trying to pick which Christmas Carol movie to watch? Donnie, do you think the Jim Carrey one really communicates that idea of care for the poor, having compassion on people who have it harder than you? Is that really communicated there?
I mean, they do try really, really hard to, but I think at times it can be a little bit overshadowed by, the emphasis of the characters, how like angry and how rude they are and all this stuff. And so
right.
I think sometimes it gets lost, and I think it can make it where it becomes too much of the focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his general crankiness. That's the way I remember is he's just a cranky old man.
Yeah.
And it's like he needs these three ghosts to make him a little less cranky.
Exactly. And so it's like it ends up being more a focus of, hey, let's just try to like make this guy less terrible and be a little bit more tolerable, as opposed to like kind of like with other movies, like where it's like the idea of, hey, this is what he's dealing with.
Right.
Let's soften him. Like, because I think that's the thing you want to see is like, you don't want people to like just be like, hey, he's bad, let's make him less bad, but to make this person understand, like, let's just kind of smooth off the rough edges, because everybody has the rough edges. Like, just we're going to smooth these off to make them understand that the things that they're experiencing are not just, that particular instance. You know what I mean? So
yeah. I do think there's a kind of emphasis, and if I remember that movie correctly, that's very much like, here's why he's cranky, and you know what, he's set in his ways. let's try. Grandpa's going to say stuff we don't agree with, so let's just let him say what he needs to say, and eventually he kind of changes out of that. I also remember that movie having a fair emphasis on the lost romance. Like in his past, that there's a that
what was her name? I'm trying to remember what her name was.
I can't remember either. But I will say, just to for the sake of time here, to go to Sawyer's film Scrooge, the romance is a big part of Scrooged. I mean, it's almost the hinge. It's the emotional hinge point is this lost romance he had.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the movie Scrooged does a good job, I think, emphasizing his lack of compassion. Doesn't go into greed like as much, but his like how he's just a cold-hearted man. It does a good job, and like it makes humor about that and stuff like that. It does a good job of, but yeah, that romance is kind of like the lens that Scrooge sees it through in the movie is the thing, and it's kind of like, spoiler alert, like near the end of the movie, his kind of emotional catharsis is when he realizes what he can be is the thing. if you don't get Scrooge being a socially isolated person, then you're not getting A Christmas Carol, I feel like. But
Sure. Well, and I remember a little bit in that movie, especially in the Ghost of Christmas, the end of Ghost of Christmas Present, where there's the man he meets in the homeless shelter who freezes to death. And he has compassion for him, but also when Karen Allen's character, who's the love interest in Ghost of Christmas Future, shoos away the children because she's like, I learned from Frank that you just got to take care of yourself and don't take care of anybody else, which isn't really a full-on compassion for the less fortunate,
yeah,
but it's kind of close. It certainly is a people are a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that movie kind of hits it pretty well. I think the thing that really shocked me about the Muppet Christmas Carol is how front and center that is. One, there's really not too much of a lost romance in the Muppet Christmas Carol one, which I remember being very central to the story in the other ones. And there's a lot of focus on that Scrooge, Michael Caine's Scrooge won't give to the charity that comes around to try and collect money. He won't give to them. He doesn't he doesn't see his brother anymore, or not his brother, it's his nephew. It's his brother in Scrooged, but it's his nephew is the character in the original book, in the original story. That he's estranged from them, but his nephew is the one who's willing to give to charity. And then it really is hit upon in the final acts of that movie, in the Ghost of Christmas Future, that he is become a person who is so focused on his greed and consuming what he can, that when he dies, people are joyful. People are so excited, which is true to the original book. They're just happy he's dead because they can now get his stuff. Like, they're so thankful he's dead. And I remember sitting with one of my daughters, and she kept saying, I just don't know, why would anyone be happy when someone dies? And to be able to say to her, well, remember how mean he's been the whole movie? Like, he didn't care about anybody, and all he cared about was his money. And I said, when all you care about is your money, then when you die, all anyone else will care about is your money. All they will care about is what they can get from you. And these people are happy. One, he's dead because they didn't like him. And two, they're happy he's dead because now they get his stuff. And that really was this breaking point for the character, is that he had become this kind of person. And then obviously when Tiny Tim, which is a tiny Kermit the Frog, dies, and you're like, oh my God, tiny Kermit the Frog dies. I don't know. I know we all talk about Baby Yoda, but tiny Kermit the Frog, I mean, come on. That's iconic right there. That it's clear. And she said, well, why is that making him so sad? And I said, well, it's because he didn't pay his employee enough money to take care of his family. Yeah. Like, he didn't pay him enough, that he had this money. He had this very loyal person that was working for, and he just didn't take care of him. And that's a part of this story, is his greatest crime was his crime of not caring for others. And I think what I want to talk about is, as parents talking about this to our kids, this is important because we know that as followers of Jesus, this is central to the gospel. That Jesus, who had all the wealth of heaven, abandons his wealth to come to us as a poor Jewish carpenter, to live among the poor, to live among those who were less fortunate, to heal the sick, to make it where people who previously couldn't work could now work and take care of themselves. And then he teaches his followers that your job is, every time you take care of somebody who doesn't have enough clothes, or doesn't have enough food, or they're in prison, or they're hungry, they're starving, they're thirsty, and you do that for them, you are doing that for me. That central to the story of Jesus is that we are meant to have compassion and generosity on those who are less fortunate. And not become Scrooges. That at Christmas time, this is how we remember it. Donnie, how do you think as a parent you have that conversation with your kid as you're watching these movies?
I think the biggest part is helping kids understand that value is not in the things you have, it's in the relationships. Because you can accumulate infinite amounts of wealth, but you can only distribute so much relational time and energy. And so when you do, but if you spend so much time, like Kyle Scrooge did, like it was like, hey, I got to just keep getting all this and I hold on to this so tight. It makes it very difficult for you to build meaningful like relationships.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, that's the thing that distracts a lot of us, is that we feel we have to meet, XYZ, but it's really about the people. Like, and I think that's why, like, you see how synonymous it is, the idea with how Jesus had everything. And he said, you know what? I don't need this. I need a relationship with the people that I care about. And like, it's like reminding the kids, like, look, you may not have a lot of money. You may not have the best job in the world. You may not have all these things, but you will have an opportunity to make an impact in people's lives just by how kind you are to them and how you treat them, because people remember the things you did more than the things you did with them, more than the things you do for them.
Mm. Well, and I think what's huge there, Donnie, and what you said, and I think a good way for parents to help their kids understand is that people matter more than money. We say that all the time to our kids. The way we say it around here is you can't love things, you can only love people. And that's created kind of monsters out of my children who, if someone's like, man, I love this food, they'll go, you can't love food, you can only love people. Because love means I want what's best for somebody, that I'm willing to work for what's best. You can't want what's best for food. You want to eat food. Yeah. And so you don't love it. But telling them Scrooge used people to get more things, right? He used people to get things. We want to use our things to love people. Yeah. He used people, loved things. We want to use things and love people. And I think that conversation right there, that's a huge theme out of these movies that you get to have a chance to talk with your kids about, that I think is huge. So Sawyer, what kind of conversation would you want to have, want parents to have with their kids about these stories?
Yeah. So I think this is a very universal story, and we can have a conversation with our kids that centers around that Scrooge's arc is all about. He learns that it's not about what they can bring to his life, about what Tiny Tim's family can bring, about what Cratchit's can bring to his life, but what he can bring into their lives is the thing. And that's why, like, the ending is so powerful when he's just eating breakfast with the Cratchits is the thing. It's such a powerful moment because, we see he has a very nice house and stuff like that. And so when he steps into this impoverished house and has joy, it's almost like a very like incontainable joy that spreads from Cratchit to Scrooge back to the whole family and to everyone there. And it's such a good, valuable lesson to have about the inherent value of people, because it's such a, like, for kids to learn, it's not about what I'm getting. It's about what I can give. I mean, and like, that's like what Christmas is all about and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I do certainly think being able to communicate to kids, one, as you said, people have inherent value because they're made in the image of God. That the systems of our world and the culture of our world really communicates that you're about as valuable as you can produce something, as valuable as the money you can make or the job that you have or the things that you do. And so if you don't have those things, if you're in a homeless shelter or you're on some kind of food assistance or anything like that, you're just inherently less than, and we got to take care of you. But you don't really matter as much as those who figured out this whole money thing. And being able to say to your kids, hey, every person has value because every person's made in the image of God. And Jesus even tells us that those who are hungry, those who are less fortunate, there's a way he's more present with them. And when we serve them, we see Jesus in the face of other people. And I think that's huge. And here's the final thing I'll say. And I'll say Scrooge really gives an opportunity for you to talk to teenagers about this, in that it has very specific, like with the homeless shelter, with these charities, of talking about the importance of those of us who do have resources, who do have who do have the ability to help, to be able to help. And we as a church, I think this is the perfect time for us to talk about this. We're right now in the middle of this whole Do Something campaign, where we're going to be, when this is released, we're asking, hey, we're trying to, as a church, let's go bless people who need what we have more than enough of. And the way I used to say it to teenagers all the time is, most of us have more than we need, but there are a lot of people who don't even have what they need. And if we can take some of our more and give to those who don't have all that they need, that's what Jesus would want us to do. So we have our $29.95 Do Something campaign we'll be doing at this point. You can talk to your kids when you're watching this movie about, hey, this is why we as a family give to this. And I would encourage you, I used to encourage parents all the time to do this with their kids. Encourage your kids to make sacrifices to give towards this. Like, they may not have $29.95 and you're just going to give it for them, but you could say, hey, as a family, what are some things we could do to give up so that we can give to this thing, right? Maybe I used to always say to kids, ask them, hey, would you be willing to, for teenagers, would you be willing to give up a Christmas present that your parents would buy? Go to your parents and say, hey, give up. Don't buy me one of the Christmas presents you're going to buy me, and use that money to give to this campaign. Or because we have this Christmas in Coweta event going on, where we're asking every family in our church to buy the Christmas gifts of children in our community whose parents can't afford to give them the kind of Christmas we would want every kid to have. Could you talk to your kids about, hey, we're going to go buy these toys, but part of this is we want to spend some of the money we have. So as a family, would you be willing to make a sacrifice for this? Maybe we don't go out to eat as much this December. Or maybe we don't do something we would normally do at this time, and we're going to use that money to bless somebody else, to get your kids involved in it. And this movie is a great way to talk about that we don't want to be Scrooges who are so focused on, hey, I want to make sure, the movie I think about a lot is Harry Potter, in the first one, when Dudley, his cousin who is spoiled, gets his presents, and he counts his birthday presents and goes, 35? I had 36 last year. Like, we don't want to be that kid who's like, oh, I have to have 35 gifts. Well, maybe you could have 33 gifts this year, because you're still going to have more gifts than you need. And maybe you could give some gifts, but having those kind of conversations. Donnie, I know your family has done Christmas in Coweta and the Do Something stuff in the past. How has that been as a family to be able to have those kind of conversations with your kids?
It's been invaluable. I'm gonna say that it's definitely invaluable, because when we would pick a name and stuff like that, and we'd be able to go through this list of things, the kids would get just genuinely excited, because they're like, because a lot of times I think, especially for probably kids that live in the United States in general, a lot of times is they don't all see less than. So it's sometimes hard for them to grasp that there are other places, or even locally, where people don't have what they need, like you said earlier. And I think when I explain that to them, there's that genuine, just it's that proud moment as a parent, going that genuine compassion.
Yeah.
Going, wow, can we get them something? And then they get excited. Can we get them more of this? They're wanting abundance for things when they ask for stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
But them also wanting it for someone else. And I love that about how the Christmas in Coweta does, is that they genuinely are excited about doing for someone else.
Well, because it's something they can relate to. They understand that every kid wants gifts on Christmas.
Exactly.
And I think this is the one thing we miss as parents sometimes, is these little 5 and 6 and 7-year-old kids that we have are so sweet and they have such tender hearts. Greed does not take long to get into our hearts and turn us all into Scrooges. And if we don't start combating that in the hearts of our children pretty early on, it'll grow in them and become cancerous to the work of Jesus in their life. And we as parents who want to help our kids love Jesus and love his way of life more than anything else, we have to know money is going to be a thing that is going to compete for how much they love Jesus and his way of life. And And things like Christmas are a time that starts.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't give your kids lots of toys, but have the conversation with your kids of, hey, we're going to do a couple less this year. We're going to do something else. We're not going to have the big thing that we normally do, and we're going to go do this instead. Or take them down to Bridging the Gap, one of our local organizations here, and let them be a part of serving. We take our kids down and we go and we hand out biscuits to people who are in line waiting for the food distribution, and we pray with people. And our kids, they just get to be a part of that, and they get to see it, to allow them to get to be a part of. There are people in this world that need help. And Jesus intends for those of us who have been blessed with more than we need to be a blessing to others. All right. Well, hey, thank you guys, as always, for joining in, Donnie and Sawyer. And of course, all of you who are joining in with us to watch this. We are very excited to be talking about this. We want to help you have better conversations in your monthly movie nights with your kids to help them learn to love Jesus and his way of life more than anything else. I hope to see you next time.